When you break an arm, the diagnostic process is actually super straightforward. You know,
Oh, totally. You just go to a clinic and they put you in front of an X-ray machine.
right. And the result is this very clear, high contrast image.
Yeah.
The doctor just points to a jagged white line on a black background and says, well, there is the problem.
Yeah, it is a binary reality. I mean, the bone is broken or the bone is intact.
And we crave that kind of visible, undeniable clarity in almost every single area of life.
We really do. I mean, the human brain relies on that sort of categorization. We want a clear metric for knowing when something is wrong so we can just, apply a specific targeted fix.
But the moment you step out of the physical realm and into the world of internal motivations or, spiritual labor and the hidden emotional toll of constantly doing good works, that X-ray machine becomes entirely useless.
Completely useless. You are looking at a diagnostic landscape that is just entirely murky.
Yeah. And what happens when the damage is invisible? Or even more confusing, what happens when the act of doing something genuinely good is the very thing destroying you from the inside out?
That is the core of the dilemma right there, because the symptoms of doing too much good often look virtually identical to the symptoms of doing something completely malicious.
Wow, yeah.
The burnout, the cynicism, the sudden collapse of character, they all stem from structural damage that was happening quietly while everyone else was just, applauding the output.
Welcome to Reformed Thinking. This is a deep dive into the ideas that shape our internal world, and I am thrilled you are joining us today.
It is great to be here.
So, for this discussion, we are focusing our attention on a striking text from Charles Spurgeon. He was a figure who understood this tension better than almost anyone, honestly.
You really did.
He delivered this incredible address to his congregation in 19th century London, and it is titled Self-Humbling and Self-Searching.
Right.
And our mission today is to dissect the occupational hazards of doing good work. We're going to unpack why the most dedicated people often feel the most inadequate and how to cure the particular type of burnout that comes from constant, unrelenting output. Okay, let's unpack this.
To ground this, we really need to look at the source text Spurgeon is pulling from. He builds his entire exposition around a single verse in the Song of Solomon. It is chapter 1, verse 6.
Okay.
And what makes this address so applicable for anyone listening today is the very specific audience Spurgeon is targeting.
Right. He isn't just talking to everybody.
No, not at all. He is not talking to people sitting on the sidelines. He isn't addressing people who are apathetic or lazy. He is speaking directly to active workers.
People getting things done.
Spot on. These are individuals who are busy managing responsibilities, helping others, keeping the gears of society turning, but they are suffering hidden structural damage in the process.
I want to jump straight into the first massive paradox Spurgeon highlights here because it really sets the stage for everything else.
Yeah, let's do it.
He points out that the people who seem the most put together, the ones everyone else looks at and assumes have zero problems, they are very often the ones crying out the loudest about their own internal flaws.
It is a wild paradox.
It really is. In the text from Song of Solomon, the speaker is called the fairest among women by the people around her. Yet her response to them is, "Look not upon me because I am black."
Right. She feels entirely uncomely. She shrinks away from the praise completely.
Yeah. Why does she do that?
Well, it highlights a fascinating psychological and spiritual reality. The people living the most upright, disciplined lives are frequently the most shamefaced about their own condition.
Which seems so backward.
It does, but the mechanism behind this really comes down to the standards of measurement we choose to adopt. Let's think about how a careless person operates.
Okay.
A careless person grades their life on a curve. They look around at the general population, see people committing obvious destructive acts, and they conclude that their own life is more than acceptable.
Right. They are using the average baseline of human behavior as their metric.
Precisely.
Which is an incredibly safe way to measure yourself, I mean.
Yeah.
If your only goal is to be slightly better than the worst person you know, you will always feel pretty good about your standing.
But the individual who looks closely at their own motives does not use the average person as a metric. They adopt a much higher standard.
Yeah.
From a theological perspective, they look at the divine requirement. They measure their internal thoughts against the moral perfection of Christ.
And that is a terrifying standard.
It is. When you place a normal, flawed human life against a backdrop of absolute perfection, the contrast is staggering.
That makes total sense.
The careless person just assumes their accounts are full. Spurgeon actually compares them to an unsafe tradesman.
Oh, I love this analogy.
Right. The failing merchant refuses to check his ledger because he prefers the illusion of solvency.
He does not want to know the truth.
No, he assumes he is wealthy right up until the bailiff knocks on the door to declare bankruptcy.
Whereas the safe tradesman, the one who's actually running a healthy business, is constantly auditing his own books. He is always terrified he might be missing a discrepancy.
Yes, he is looking for the errors.
And Spurgeon brings up this idea of having more light, which creates such a brilliant visual. Like if you were standing in a dimly lit room, everything looks reasonably clean, you know?
Yeah, you do not notice the dust accumulating on the baseboards at all.
Or the smudges covering the windows. But the moment you turn the lights up to maximum brightness, all those hidden spots become impossible to ignore.
And the room did not suddenly get dirtier.
Right. Your ability to perceive the dirt increased.
He reinforces this with the analogy of the white handkerchief on the snow, which is just beautiful.
Oh, share that one.
So, if you take a white linen handkerchief and hold it up inside your house, you would call it pure white. Your eyes perceive it as the definition of cleanliness.
Sure.
But if you take that same handkerchief outside after a fresh fall of winter snow and you lay it down on the ground, the reality shifts.
It looks completely different.
Completely. Suddenly, next to the absolute untouched purity of the snow, that handkerchief looks dingy. It looks yellowed.
Wow.
The fabric itself did not change. The standard of comparison changed.
I find this entirely relatable, but I also I want to push back on this from a psychological angle for a second.
Okay, go for it.
Is there not a significant danger of false humility creeping in here?
Yeah.
I mean, we have all encountered people who constantly put themselves down, but you could tell they are just fishing for compliments.
Oh, absolutely. The humble brag.
Right. They want you to contradict them. And Spurgeon himself warns about this. He calls it cant and mock humility.
It does.
He tells this hilarious story about a monk who used to walk around his monastery claiming he was completely full of sin, weeping, and saying he was as bad as Judas Iscariot.
And the punchline of that story reveals everything about human nature, doesn't it?
It really does.
Another person finally approached the monk and just agreed with him.
Right. The guy said, "You know what? You are right. You are a wretch." And the monk instantly became highly offended.
It's furious.
He demanded to know what he had ever done to deserve such an outrageous insult.
Yeah.
Because it was all a performance.
Yes.
So if we are looking at this from a practical standpoint, how do you differentiate between the genuine self-awareness we are analyzing here and attention-seeking self-deprecation?
Well, the distinction really lies in the internal response. Mock humility is essentially the offspring of self-conceit.
Okay. Say more about that.
The person performing self-deprecation does not actually feel the weight of their flaws, right? They are using a script to harvest validation from the people around them.
They want you to tell them how great they are.
Precisely. Genuine self-awareness, on the other hand, is born from acute distress. Spurgeon argues that a truly awakened person is genuinely bothered by their flaws.
They're not looking for a compliment to soothe them.
No, not at all. If you lose sleep because you spoke an unadvised word, or if you feel a heavy burden because you lost your temper for a brief moment in traffic, that distress is a sign of life. Apathy is the real danger.
So the person fishing for compliments is just playing a social game. But the genuine worker is frustrated by their own inability to live up to the standard they love.
And that hyper-awareness is crucial. If you are listening to this and you find yourself constantly frustrated by your own shortcomings, realize that this distress is a symptom of a well-lit room.
That is a great way to put it.
You are seeing the dust because the light is on. The standard has been elevated.
Which naturally moves us into the core of the text, because this hyper-awareness leads directly to identifying the specific damages caused by our daily labors.
Right.
The text in the Song of Solomon continues, "Look not upon me because I am black, because the sun hath looked upon me." Notice the source of the damage there.
The sun.
Yeah, the darkening of the skin, the exhaustion, the blemishes, they're not coming from rolling in the mud. The damage is coming from the sun. It is coming from the environment of the work itself.
What's fascinating here is that it is a brilliant subversion of our normal expectations.
How so?
Well, we are conditioned to believe that idleness is the primary enemy of a good life. And, idleness certainly causes rust. A machine left in the rain will degrade.
Yeah.
But active labor causes sunburn. Engaging in rigorous labor, carrying the emotional weight of a community, managing high-stakes responsibilities, these things inflict a specific type of trauma on the human system if we are not extremely guarded.
There are occupational hazards to doing good.
Exactly. I mean, spot on. There are real hazards.
And Spurgeon identifies the specific nature of these sunburns. He maps out the progression of burnout in a way that feels incredibly modern.
He really does. Let's break those down.
The first sunburn he identifies is the loss of zeal. You start a project or a career or a ministry, and you are completely full of fire. You have a vision.
You are ready to change the world.
Right. But over time, the temperature begins to drop. You pour your energy into helping people, and they do not change. You work long hours, and the structural problems remain identical.
The mechanics of that loss of zeal are tied directly to the expectation of a return on investment.
Well, that makes sense.
Human beings are wired to need feedback loops. When you exert energy, you expect a visible result. When that visible success does not materialize, the lack of return acts like a bucket of cold water on the initial fire.
Yeah, you might still be showing up to the office or still managing the charity, but the internal temperature has plummeted. The labor continues, but the zeal is entirely extinguished.
And that drop in temperature naturally decays into the second sunburn. A sour temper and a critical habit.
Oh man, this one hits incredibly close to home for anyone in leadership or middle management.
It really is a trap.
You start out loving the people you are working with, but eventually you get caught up in the endless contentions. You have to mediate arguments, put out fires, deal with the logistics of human friction.
Exhausting.
And slowly, almost imperceptibly, your habit shifts. You stop enjoying the work and start judging everyone involved in it.
Spurgeon uses a culinary analogy for this that is just devastating.
What is it?
He describes a person sitting down at a banquet, but instead of eating the food to nourish their body, they just take tiny tastes of each dish specifically to find fault with the flavor.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, they complain about the seasoning, they critique the temperature, they are surrounded by a feast, but they are starving themselves to death because they have replaced participation with criticism.
That is a terrifying psychological trap. You feel like you are doing your job by pointing out the flaws, but you are actually starving your own soul.
Precisely. When you are constantly fixing problems, your brain becomes wired to only see defects.
And the third sunburn accelerates this exhaustion. Spurgeon points to distraction and worry. He ties this to the biblical story of Martha, who was entirely consumed by the logistics of hosting.
Right, she was running around the kitchen.
Yeah, your energies are drained by the anxiety of the task rather than the physical execution of it.
Yeah.
You are spinning plates, constantly terrified that one is going to shatter.
We really need to define the difference between physical load and cognitive load here.
Okay, yeah, let's do that.
The physical act of doing a job might only take 3 hours, but the cognitive load, the worry about the outcome, the anticipation of failure, the mental rehearsal of difficult conversations, that runs 24 hours a day.
It never stops.
Never. The Martha syndrome is when the cognitive load completely eclipses the actual work. The sun is beating down on your mind, not your hands.
And when the mind is constantly bearing that weight, you hit the fourth sunburn, the total loss of joy.
Yeah, the human brain simply gets weary.
Year after year of the same responsibilities, the novelty just wears off. The initial thrill of organizing a massive project or the dopamine hit of solving a crisis fades into gray drudgery.
You look at the calendar, see the same tasks you have done 1,000 times, and the joy is entirely absent.
But the fifth sunburn might be the most insidious of all, because it occurs not when you are failing, but when you are succeeding.
This is a crucial point.
It is injured humility. You do the work, you achieve the goals, people applaud your efforts, and the human ego begins to metabolize that success.
And you start quietly thinking that you are exceptional.
Yes. You assume the harvest was due entirely to your own brilliant farming techniques. The success itself becomes the sun that scorches your humility, replacing it with a quiet, obnoxious pride.
Which begs the question, why is success so much more dangerous to the human character than failure?
Right, because when we fail, we are forced to look at our limitations. We have to ask for help.
But when we win, we naturally want to take all the credit.
Which leads directly into the final sunburn, mixed motives and self-reliance. Once you have 20 years of experience under your belt, you start doing the task mechanically. You rely on your resume.
You think, I have delivered this presentation 100 times, I can do it in my sleep.
To illustrate the danger of that mindset, Spurgeon brings up Martin Luther.
Yes, if anyone had the right to rely on their own experience, it was Luther.
He had an extensive history of standing up to the most powerful authorities on the planet.
He faced down emperors and popes. He possessed a staggering intellect and a famously bold personality.
Yet, historical accounts note that Luther's knees would literally knock together with fear. before he stood up to preach a regular sermon to his congregation.
Why? Because he recognized the absolute peril of operating on autopilot. He knew that the moment he relied on his own accumulated skill, the spiritual vitality of his work would instantly evaporate.
Wow. And Spurgeon himself operated under this kind of crushing pressure. We have to remember the context of his life in London. He wasn't just casually writing essays in a quiet room.
No, he was managing a massive organization. He had thousands of people relying on him daily.
Right. In any given hour, he might have a person in the midst of an existential crisis demanding answers, a backslider needing correction, two prominent members of the community locked in a bitter dispute, all of them clamoring for his attention simultaneously.
The sheer volume of human needs surrounding him was staggering.
And the demands of that environment force you out into the blazing sun. There is no shade when the needs of the community are that relentless. Here's where it gets really interesting, though. Let's contextualize this for the modern listener. It is like a lifeguard working at an incredibly crowded, dangerous beach. The lifeguard is sitting in the tower, intensely focused on the water. They are scanning the waves, watching for drowning swimmers, anticipating the rip currents.
Right, hypervigilant.
They are so consumed by the vital task of saving lives that they completely forget to apply their own sunscreen. By the time the sun goes down, they have successfully pulled 3 people from the water. They did their job perfectly.
But they go home with severe second-degree burns all over their own shoulders.
Yes. And this is where I want to raise a difficult question. Is it fair to blame the worker for getting sunburned when the environment is that urgent?
That is a tough one.
If a swimmer is actively drowning, the lifeguard cannot just abandon their post to go sit in the shade and rub aloe vera on their arms. The urgency of the work seems to demand the sacrifice.
You are hitting on the core tension of all caregiving, leadership, and public service. The needs are undeniably real. The crises are not manufactured. But Spurgeon's thesis is that ignoring your own condition does not make you a martyr. It eventually ruins your ability to be of any use to anyone. If the lifeguard gets sunstroke and passes out in the tower, the next drowning swimmer dies. The text moves explicitly into this reality. They made me the keeper of the vineyards, but my own vineyard have I not kept.
That phrase is haunting.
It is the ultimate catastrophic danger for the watchful worker. It is the tragedy of self-neglect.
The unkept vineyard. The worker is so busy pruning everyone else's branches that their own field is completely overrun with weeds.
It really speaks to the peril of mechanical service. Think about the psychology of gathering information purely for distribution.
Okay, what do you mean?
A person reads a text or studies a subject not to be nourished by it, but solely to extract bullet points to teach someone else. They pray for the physical and emotional needs of their community, but they abandon all private, personal reflection.
And the terrifying reality is that this internal hollowing out often happens alongside outward success.
Yes. You can become highly efficient at keeping the public vineyard while your internal world turns into a wasteland.
To really understand how this happens psychologically, we need to spend some time on an analogy Spurgeon uses, which he actually credits to a preacher named Henry Melville.
The Swiss Guide.
Yes, it's the story of the Swiss guide. Imagine a local guide living in the Alps of Switzerland. It is his profession to conduct travelers through the sublime, breathtaking mountain passes.
A dream job for a lot of people.
Right. When he first started this job, he was undoubtedly captivated by the landscape. He looked at the massive glaciers, the hidden alpine lakes, the sheer drops, and he felt a genuine sense of awe. Sharing that beauty with foreign travelers was a joy.
The sublimity of the mountains resonated in his own chest. He was experiencing the journey alongside the tourists.
But then the repetition begins. He does the tour, and he does it again the following morning and the next week.
Over and over.
After taking hundreds of different tour groups through those exact same passes over years of repetitive labor, something inside him shuts down. He becomes a biological machine.
Spurgeon says the guide learns to talk book.
Talk book, yes. He recites the historical facts perfectly. He points to the eagle circling overhead. He explains the geological formations of the ice. But he feels absolutely nothing.
The awe has been entirely replaced by routine.
He is pointing out a majestic beauty that he has become entirely numb to.
That phrase, talking book, captures the essence of burnout so perfectly.
Yeah.
It is the transition from experiencing a reality to merely reciting a script.
How does a passionate human being turn into an animatronic figure like that?
It requires a specific type of emotional detachment. To survive the repetition, the brain suppresses the emotional response.
The survival mechanism.
Yeah, the guide is giving directions to a summit he no longer inhabits internally. He's surrounded by majesty, but his only concern is getting the group to the checkpoint so he can collect his fee and go to sleep.
That is so bleak. And there's another analogy connected to this that is just as haunting, perhaps even more brutal.
The flower girl.
Yes.
The flower girl.
Picture a street vendor in a busy 19th century city. She is holding a massive basket of freshly cut violets.
Okay.
A wealthy passerby walks past her, catches the intense, sweet scent of the flowers, and thinks, what a wonderful, fragrant life she must have. She gets to sit surrounded by such beautiful smells all day.
Which seems like a fair assumption.
But the reality of her internal experience is the exact opposite. Because those violets are constantly under her nose for 12 hours a day in the heat, and then piled up in her tiny, cramped room while she tries to sleep, she absolutely hates the smell of them.
Oh, wow.
The sheer overexposure has created a physical revulsion.
You can actually look at the biology of this. It is a phenomenon called olfactory fatigue.
Right. The human nervous system is designed to stop registering a constant stimulus to protect the brain from sensory overload. If a smell is always present, the receptors in the nose literally downregulate. The brain ignores the beauty to focus on survival.
And Spurgeon takes this biological mechanism and applies it to the spiritual and emotional lives of active workers.
Which is brilliant.
People who are surrounded by good works, charity events, religious activities, and community service can actually develop a revulsion to those very things.
Because they are drowning in them?
Yes, they are surrounded by spiritual violets, but because of the massive overexposure without any internal renewal, they secretly loathe the entire enterprise.
They're selling flowers they despise. They're keepers of other men's vineyards, giving out advice, directing traffic, organizing the labor. But their own vineyard has gone to ruin.
The sensory adaptation has completely deadened their capacity to feel the weight of what they're doing.
I want to stop here and ask a very pointed question on behalf of everyone listening. If you recognize yourself in this, if you realize you are the Swiss guide and your literal livelihood is taking people through those mountains, how do you stop being a machine?
That is the big question.
The schedule demands that you do the tour again tomorrow at 8 a.m. You have a mortgage. You have employees who rely on you. You cannot just throw down your walking stick and walk away.
No, you cannot.
And for our listeners, where in your daily routine are you talking book? Where are you acting as a signpost, standing on the side of the road, pointing the way for everyone else but never moving a single inch yourself?
Mm-hmm.
How do you fix that structural damage without abandoning the people who rely on your output?
It is a critical dilemma, and Spurgeon anticipates this exact tension. He knows you cannot simply abandon the vineyard you were hired to keep, but he offers a highly specific, practical cure found in the final phase of this text, verse 7 of the chapter.
Okay, what is the cure?
The speaker in the text asks a vital question. Tell me, O thou, whom my soul loveth, where thou feedest, where thou makest thy flock to rest at noon.
The noonday rest. The antidote to the sunburn.
The cure is fundamentally about returning to the original source of nourishment. The worker has to stop the output and ask to have their first love rekindled.
It is a matter of basic physics, really.
Yeah, you cannot give out vital energy that you do not possess. If your internal battery is completely empty, nothing of value can come out of you. You might be able to offer mechanical gestures, but the life force is gone.
So what does this all mean for the Swiss guide? What does that actual recovery process look like?
Well, for the guide to get his awe back, he has to take a solitary excursion. He has to go up into the mountains entirely alone. He needs to see the hills in a fresh light, perhaps in a different season or under different weather conditions.
Without the tourists.
That is the crucial factor. He must do it without a tour group standing behind him waiting for a lecture. He must experience the beauty for himself again, not as a product to be sold, not as a lesson to be taught, but as a reality to be felt.
He has to temporarily strip off the identity of the guide and just become a human being standing in front of a mountain.
He has to take off the uniform. He has to stop viewing the landscape as his workplace.
And Spurgeon applies this to his own life with a level of transparency that is quite striking.
He really does. Even after decades of public speaking, massive international success, and enormous daily responsibilities, he admits that he cannot rely on his resume to sustain him.
He says he has to come to the cross exactly like a guilty sinner, looking for life, just as he did on the very first day.
The accumulated knowledge of 20 years means nothing if the present connection to the source is severed. He has to go back to the solitary feeding.
I want to challenge the practicality of this cure within our modern context, though.
Okay, let's hear it.
Taking a solitary excursion sounds idyllic. A silent retreat to the mountains. Sign me up.
Right. Sounds amazing.
But when your inbox is overflowing with urgent requests, when your family needs your attention, when your community relies on your leadership, stepping away feels incredibly selfish.
It does.
We live in a culture that equates resting with quitting. If you are not hustling, you are failing. We have taken the gig economy mindset and applied it to every aspect of our existence, including how we help others. The pressure to always be producing is crushing.
That is the dominant lie of our culture, and it is a guaranteed recipe for systemic collapse. Spurgeon cuts right through that modern guilt.
How so?
He argues that pausing to eat is not losing time. Think about a lumberjack tasked with cutting down a forest.
Okay.
Imagine he is swinging a dull axe, making very little progress, and someone tells him to stop and sharpen the blade. If the lumberjack says, "I am too busy chopping trees to stop and sharpen my axe," we would call him a fool.
Right, because he's just wasting energy at that point.
A worker who refuses to stop and eat will inevitably sicken, grow weak, and accomplish far less in the long run. Rest at noon is not a luxury afforded only to the wealthy. It is not an option for the weak. It is a mechanical requirement for sustained output.
If you do not keep the machinery of your own soul in good repair, the engine seizes up. You break down, and then you are of no use to anyone, no matter how urgent the needs are.
When the text asks, "Where thou makest thy flock to rest at noon," it is recognizing a basic reality of the environment. The heat of the day, the peak of the sun's intensity, requires a pause.
You cannot outwork the sun.
You cannot. You have to seek the shade. You have to feed on truth for yourself, dig into the quiet, hidden things alone, and enrich your own spirit. Only after that internal nourishment has taken place can you go back to the tour group and speak with genuine authority.
This has been such a dense, incredibly abundant progression of ideas. We have covered a massive amount of psychological and spiritual ground here.
We really have.
Let's trace the arc of how we arrived here. We started with the paradox of the hyper-awareness of flaws. Understanding that deep distress over our own internal shortcomings is actually a sign of light, not darkness. It proves the conscience is awake. Then we mapped out the specific sunburns of active labor. The thermodynamics of losing our zeal, the decay into a sour temper and constant criticism, the crushing cognitive load of the Martha syndrome.
The injured humility from success.
Yes. From there, we looked at the devastating tragedy of the unkept vineyard, the horrifying possibility of becoming a Swiss guide who talks book, or a flower girl who has developed a biological revulsion to the very violets she sells.
And finally, we arrived at the absolute mechanical necessity of returning to the source for solitary feeding, sharpening the axe, and resting at noon. It is a complete diagnostic scan of the active life. And Spurgeon closes his address with a specific plea to a different kind of listener.
Oh, that is right.
He knows that some people engaging with his words might not be exhausted workers at all. They might be completely on the outside of this entire framework. They might be active opponents, fighting against the reality of their own flaws and resisting the need for any internal change.
What is his message to them?
His final call to them is an open invitation. Drop your weapons. If you are resisting this truth, you do not have to remain an enemy. There is an open door to seek pardon, to step out of the exhaustion of rebellion, and to start fresh.
Which leaves us with a final thought to mull over as we close out this deep dive into Reformed thinking. I want to build on the mechanics we have discussed and take it a step further into the reality of our current world.
Okay.
Our society operates like an endless digital factory. It is brilliantly designed to force you into being a permanent keeper of other people's vineyards. Between constant notifications, social media expectations, and the relentless pressure to always be reacting to the latest crisis, the sun is always beating down.
It never sets.
So what if the most radical, rebellious act you can perform this week isn't working harder? What if it isn't achieving more visible success or arguing more effectively online? What if the most radical thing you can do is deliberately walk away, just for a moment, to tend a single hidden vine in your own life that no one else will ever see?
A true solitary excursion. Refusing to talk book and choosing instead to sit quietly in the shade.
Because at the end of the day, the X-ray machine might be useless when it comes to diagnosing the inner life of a busy worker.
Yeah.
The waters might be murky. The burnout might be invisible to everyone applauding your efforts. But the cure is surprisingly beautifully clear. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. We will catch you next time.